Thank you, Representative Rutherford. We appreciate your remarks. We appreciate all the legislators' remarks this afternoon. And I want to mention one other thing while I just have the podium here, is that in the back there are materials, some printed materials that we would love you to take with you, bring to your friends and neighbors, and as was said, talk to them. It's like the old commercial, you tell two friends and you tell two friends. I'm dating myself, I'm a little old to know that commercial, but the point is, it's about making the connections with your friends, families, co-workers, and that. And this is about not only a movement here in Ohio, but a fantastic movement across the United States. This movement would not be here except for that leadership throughout the country and through our leaders and our district captains. Many of them are here today. So I just want to say one thing. Thank you to all of our district captains. I want them to be formally recognized and give them a round of applause as well, because they're the heart and soul of this organization. Now, we talk about the heart and soul. Now we talk about some of the minds of the organization. And I want to bring up our regional director, Mr. Bob Berry. Now, Bob has had extensive experience with Article 5, has been involved with this organization, and has been involved with the Article 5 idea for a long time. Truly is somebody who can say, I was there when. So talk to a wonderful man, has made our job very easy here in the state of Ohio. Mr. Bob Berry. You bet.
Thank you so much. You know, it's really amazing for me to be able to see where this movement has come from. Because when I first started writing about this back in 2012, it wasn't a movement. It was an idea. In fact, it was a very obscure idea. It was just something that was talked about from really people who were in academia. You see, there was an Article 5 movement some decades ago that really peaked in the late 80s. And it has really been in the ditch since the late 80s. This is the early balanced budget amendment idea. And this came to within 2 states of getting to 34, which is that trigger number that we need to be able to call an Article 5 convention. And back then it was just about the balanced budget amendment. And I want to remind you that at this time the national debt was under $2 trillion. It is now something like 18, and that's not including a lot of the unfunded things that we have really no way to pay for. And because of a bunch of fear tactics, that movement was defeated, and states started getting afraid, and legislators started getting afraid. They didn't understand the distinction between an Article 5 convention of the states and a constitutional convention. They made that very basic mistake. And because of that error in terminology, because they weren't prepared for that argument, we began to lose momentum. And the whole thing went into the ditch, and it stayed there for decades. And when I started writing about this, and other people started writing about this in 2012 or so, this idea started to germinate. And we started seeing people grasping onto this because they know what I know and what you know. And that is, this is the last opportunity we are going to have. This is our last best chance to save this country. If I didn't think so, I wouldn't say that. I really wouldn't. That is not just a slogan. I absolutely believe that. I believed it then, and I believe it now. And apparently a lot of you believe it too, because now it's a full-fledged movement. We are here. And we are not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. What happened in the late 80s and early 90s with the downfall of the then balanced budget amendment only movement has to go down as one of the greatest missed opportunities in history. We came so close to putting a ceiling on the federal debt that has now grown to nightmare proportions. It is now undeniably an existential threat to our country, to our lives, to our children's lives. We are going to need you to stand with these legislators in this House behind me. We are going to need you to provide the extra measure of courage that it's going to take to make this thing a reality. This is a historic moment. There are very few times in anyone's lives where you can say, this was a moment I'll remember. I'll remember this for the rest of my life, when we had an opportunity to change history. And this is one of those moments. And don't let you forget that, and don't let them forget that. So I want to tell you about a kind of an interesting experience that I had back in 2012. I happened to be in Washington, D.C., and I was in a building where we were later to write what is now the Convention of States application language. And we were in a building And this building was an interesting building because it had offices for all of the 50 states. And so you had all these flags. When you look from right to left, you see all these flags of all the different offices. And this was intended to be kind of like an embassy for all the states, so that when they had officials come from the state, they would have a place in Washington to go so that they could talk to the Congress and they could do everything they needed to do to have representation in Washington. And the comical part about this is I asked somebody who was working there, I said, so who's in these offices? And I was told by one of the security guards, well, nobody's in them. There's nobody in these offices. They're just ceremonial. There might be one or two people in there. You know, I said, well, the governors, when they come to town, do they ever come here? And he said, well, yeah, occasionally they come here for like a photo op, because it's quite a grand building and it makes a good picture. But that's it. I tell you that story because that's what Washington thinks of the state of Ohio. That's what Washington thinks of you. They haven't heard from you in a little while. They are hearing from us now. And we are not going to let them forget that we are in charge of this country. They are not in charge of this country. And we are going to get control of this monster, and we're going to do that right now. Well, we got to talk about half measures, because something like 90% of the American people are in favor of a balanced budget. And I'm in favor of a balanced budget. Most of you are, I'm sure, in favor of a balanced budget. But I'm here to tell you that a balanced budget is not enough. And the reason that's important is this legislature already passed an Article 5 balanced budget only Article 5 resolution. That's already been done. Many of them may tell you that they've already done this, that this is enough. This isn't enough. In fact, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm back in 1989, because now we have much bigger problems than just the budget. We got an out-of-control Congress. We've got career politicians. They think they run our lives. They are interpreting the Commerce Clause to basically regulate every aspect of your life. We are in exactly the same place in 2015 that they were in 1989. We do not want to have another missed opportunity on our hands. So when anybody tells you, we've already done this, we've already seen this, we've already voted for this, I need you to be prepared to remind them that that is not enough, that we need the Convention of States application. We need to limit the size, scope, the jurisdictions of Congress, of all of federal Washington. We need to get this monster under control. This is the last opportunity we are ever going to have to do this. In closing, I want to say thank you to any of you who were part of the Tea Party movement, who are part of the Tea Party movement. We are standing on the shoulders of people who got into politics for the first time, who didn't understand anything about this, who said, I know something's got to be done, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do something about it. And what that whole Tea Party movement was about getting the right people elected. We were told we needed to get the right people elected, and we went to town. In 2010, we campaigned, some of us for the first time in our lives, and we got a lot of the right people elected, and we turned over Congress. And we thought that was going to do the trick. And what happened? They sold us out the minute they got there. Now, we had to go through that experience to know what the answer was. The answer is, getting the right people elected is not enough. A balanced budget only, Article 5, is not enough. Convention of States is enough. It is sufficient to the problem. We need to drive that point home, and unless I miss my guess, you are just the people to do it. Thank you very much.